What if I told you that one of the most explosive royal moments of the year didn't happen behind palace gates, didn't leak from some shadowy insider, didn't involve a dossier, a scandal, or a paparazzi ambush, but instead erupted in the middle of a polished, meticulously rehearsed speech at a global leadership event? What if the entire feud between Meghan Markle and Kate Middleton was reignited not by a confrontation, not by a secret meeting, not by a leaked email, but by a single unexpected line, one sentence, one perfectly timed moment of humor that hit Meghan like a thunderbolt and sent shockwaves through royal watchers, PR teams, and the entire Sussex orbit? And here's the real kicker. What if Kate knew exactly what she was doing when she said it? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because on the stage of the Future Workforce Summit, an event where everyone expected a safe, predictable, diplomatic speech, Kate delivered a moment so subtle, so clever, so disarmingly shaded that half the audience didn't even notice it. Until the clips began circulating online, until lip readers jumped in, until analysts compared her tone, posture, timing, and history with Meghan. And suddenly the internet realized that wasn't just a joke. That wasn't polite banter. That wasn't an accidental word choice. It was intentional. It was pointed. It was royal-level sarcasm dipped in honey. And it was aimed straight at Meghan Markle. But here's the question you need to ask yourself. Because it sets the stage for everything that follows. Why now? Why would Kate, the palace's golden example of emotional restraint, grace under pressure, and icy self-control, choose this moment to poke fun? Why would she, after years of silence, years of taking the high road, years of letting Meghan dominate headlines unchecked, decide to slip a dagger, disguised as a joke, into the narrative? What pushed her? What snapped? What was she responding to? Because make no mistake, something happened. Something happened behind the scenes, away from cameras, away from official statements, away from the carefully crafted royal messaging. Something that left Kate feeling that humor, pointed, layered, strategic humor, was now fair game. Something that made her think, okay, enough. And that's what this story is really about. The joke is the spark, the headline, the highlight, but the real fire was already burning underneath it. You don't poke a global celebrity rival in front of an international audience unless something has been simmering for a long time. And if you think Meghan's reaction was exaggerated or dramatic or over the top, you're missing the bigger picture. Meghan's anger didn't come from one comment. It came from what that comment represented. Because it wasn't just a joke. It was a shift in power. Let's rewind for a second. The Future Workforce Summit isn't some minor event. It's not a charity luncheon or a press photo op. It's a global platform where leaders, educators, innovators, and philanthropists gather to discuss the next generation's opportunities and challenges. Kate was scheduled as a keynote speaker, her first major appearance after a long stretch of limited publicity and intense scrutiny. Expectations were high. Critics were watching. Supporters were cheering. And the palace was nervous. Very nervous. But Kate walked on stage calm, glowing, composed, almost unnervingly serene. And as she spoke about resilience, career obstacles, mentorship, and the way young people are shaped by modern pressures, everything felt exactly how it should. Safe, stable, predictable, until she reached a moment that wasn't in the prepared notes. A moment so quick, so light, that if you blinked, you almost missed it. Yet, you felt something shift. A passing remark about people who try to skip the hard work and jump straight onto luxury decks. A pause. A playful smile. A glint in her eye. And then she continued her speech like nothing happened. But the audience felt it. Reporters felt it. Social media exploded within minutes with, "Did Kate just shade Meghan? Luxury decks? Are we talking about the yacht rumors? No way she meant that, right? Wait, she definitely meant that." And the clip spread. Fast. But here's where everything really begins. Meghan saw the clip almost immediately. And according to several insiders, she didn't just get angry. She spiraled. She felt humiliated, targeted, mocked. She saw it not as a random joke or even a subtle diss, but as an intentional attack. A reminder that Kate, despite her image of sweetness and decorum, isn't naive. She knows what people say about Meghan. She knows the rumors, the stories, the nicknames. She knows the Duchess of Yacht label that has circulated online for years. And she knows exactly how to reference something without actually referencing it. But again, why did Kate say it? That's what this introduction is here to prepare you for. Because when you dig deeper, when you follow the trail backward into the messages Meghan allegedly sent to event organizers days before the summit, into the connections she tried to re-establish with royal-adjacent figures, into the way she's been positioning herself in interviews and leaked conversations, you begin to see a larger picture, a rivalry reignited, pressure building behind palace doors, and a Kate Middleton who, for the first time in years, seems genuinely done holding back. And maybe that's the part people aren't ready to admit. Kate isn't passive. Kate isn't fragile. Kate isn't a background character in Meghan's story. She's strategic, well-informed, and far more aware of public narratives than she lets on. So when she chooses to make a joke, it's not clumsy. It's not accidental. It's deliberate. But this next part, this is where things get messy. Because Kate's shade wasn't unprovoked. It wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't random. Something happened days earlier, something involving Meghan, that pushed her toward this moment. And once you understand that, the whole situation looks different. You begin to see patterns, decisions, accumulated tension, and a breaking point disguised as a punchline. And the strangest part? The Future Workforce Summit wasn't even the original battleground. Meghan had been working behind the scenes, trying to align herself with initiatives Kate already champions, trying to create parallel branding, parallel narratives, parallel messaging, trying to present herself as a global leadership figure in the exact same spaces Kate occupies. And word of those attempts did not sit well with palace staff, or with William, or, eventually, with Kate. So when that speech moment came, when Kate had the microphone, when she felt the weight of months, maybe years, of Meghan's subtle encroachment, she didn't resist temptation. She embraced it, softly, quietly, elegantly, but unmistakably. Which brings us to the present, where Meghan is reportedly furious, pacing, venting, voice-noting friends. Where Harry is caught between frustration and exhaustion. Where PR teams on both sides are scrambling to revise narratives, prevent escalation, and control optics. Where media analysts are dissecting Kate's joke like a political statement. And where the internet, once again, is choosing sides. But this video isn't about choosing sides. It's about exposing the hidden dynamics, the real story behind the headlines, the emotional undercurrents that drove Meghan to react the way she did, and the quiet power move Kate made in plain sight. Because you're going to see, chapter by chapter, that this drama isn't about one joke or one rumor. It's about years of unspoken tension finally cracking open. It's about two women with completely different personalities, goals, and strategies, colliding in a moment witnessed by millions. It's about image versus ambition, silence versus expression, royalty versus reinvention. It's about two different worlds that collided once and are now colliding again in ways neither expected. So ask yourself this. If Kate's joke was the match, what was the gasoline poured long before she stepped on stage? What message, what mistake, what misstep, what secret frustration triggered the most un-Kate-like moment we've seen from her in years? Because once we dig into the days leading up to the summit, once we examine Meghan's private communication that leaked, once we uncover the resurfaced rumors that Meghan feared most, the picture becomes clearer and far more dramatic. But before we go deeper, before we unravel the messages, the panic, the reaction, the spiraling, and the fallout, we need to start with the moment itself. The exact words Kate said, the body language, the silence afterward, the first few gasps in the audience, the subtle, almost invisible smirk on her face. All of it matters, because all of it becomes the foundation for the storm that followed. And that's exactly where we're headed next. Straight into the full breakdown of the line that launched a royal-level meltdown. The joke that ignited global debate. The moment Meghan took personally, and maybe she wasn't wrong too. Because what Kate said wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't harmless. It was calculated. It was deliberate. And it was the beginning of something much bigger. And the craziest part? That line, innocent on paper, was directly connected to something Meghan did just days earlier. Something she thought no one in the palace would ever find out about. Something that explains everything. But what exactly did Meghan do behind the scenes? What message did she send? Who did she send it to? And how did Kate discover it? The answers will change the way you see the summit moment forever. And that is where our story truly begins. What exactly did Kate say that caused Meghan to unravel within minutes? What single line, delivered with perfect composure and a soft, deliberate pause, detonated an emotional chain reaction that ricocheted from the future workforce summit stage all the way to Montecito? Let's start right at the center of the explosion, because everything, from the spiraling, the angry messages, the PR panic, the wildfire of online reaction, everything starts with this one moment. And the strangest part? Kate didn't raise her voice. She didn't glare. She didn't sneer. She didn't change her posture. She weaponized the one thing Meghan has never been able to disarm: calm confidence. Picture the room. A vast auditorium filled with educators, executives, youth leaders, foundation representatives, and global influencers. Cameras lined the back wall. Press badges glittered under soft lights. Screens displayed Kate's name, her patronages, her initiatives. And there she was, standing at the podium, graceful, polished, unshakable. You could feel the hush, that reverent silence people instinctively give someone they respect. Kate had been out of the spotlight for a while. Her return carried a sense of anticipation, and she handled that expectation with the precision of someone who understands exactly who she is and exactly how people see her. She started normally, talking about modern challenges for young people entering the workforce, the importance of resilience, the need for mentorship in chaotic times. It was safe, predictable, exactly what everyone expected. But then she shifted, just slightly, a tiny breath, a subtle transition away from her prepared notes. And if you watch the clip, really watch it, you can see the moment even the teleprompter operator tensed. She said, "And of course, the world today is full of shortcuts, temptations to skip the hard work, to bypass the challenges, to leapfrog straight onto luxury decks." Silence, a beat, a flicker of amusement. Then the tiniest glimmer of a smile, quick enough to look accidental, slow enough to feel intentional. For most people in the room, it was nothing, a harmless phrase, a playful metaphor. But for anyone who has followed royal controversies for more than 5 minutes, it was unmistakable, because luxury decks isn't a neutral phrase. Not in the context of Meghan, not in the context of the yacht rumors that have been weaponized against her for years. Whether the rumors are fair or unfair, true or fabricated, irrelevant or exaggerated, what matters is that Kate used a phrase that echoes a long-standing online narrative Meghan despises. But here's the fascinating part. Kate didn't say Meghan's name. She didn't point, insinuate, or accuse. She didn't need to. In fact, the absence of specificity is exactly what made the moment so powerful. It let people make the connection themselves. It let interpretation do the work. It let plausible deniability protect her while provocation did its job. That's real skill. That's the difference between improvisation and strategy. And Meghan knew it. Within seconds of the clip hitting social media, Meghan was reportedly pacing across her Montecito kitchen, demanding to know why Kate went after her publicly. According to a source close enough to hear her tone but distant enough to stay anonymous, Meghan kept replaying the clip, pointing out Kate's smile, her pause, her body language. Meghan didn't hear a harmless metaphor. She heard a direct insult. A signal that Kate was no longer taking the high road. A sign that the gloves were off. But let's stay inside that room for just a moment longer, because the reactions in real time tell you everything about how loaded the joke actually was. Aides sitting in the front row exchanged quick glances, the kind where your eyes widen before you can stop yourself. A few audience members let out awkward half-chuckles, unsure if they were allowed to laugh. Even William, seated off stage, blinked in a way that looked suspiciously like, "Did she just say that?" Reporters whispered. Photographers shot each other quick looks. People leaned forward, sensing they might have just witnessed something unusual. Kate, however, didn't break. She sailed on, slipping seamlessly back into her polished speech. Not a crack in her posture, not a wobble in her voice. A masterclass in composed mischief. Now, if you're wondering whether the phrase luxury decks was spontaneous or rehearsed, here's where things get interesting. Those close to the palace insist that Kate deviated from the official script. She went off note. She went off teleprompter. And that tiny deviation is exactly why Meghan's reaction was so intense. Because if it wasn't scripted, then it came from Kate herself. And that meant Kate wasn't just making a joke. She was making a point. And you might be thinking, okay, but maybe Meghan overreacted. Maybe the joke wasn't about her. Maybe the internet made the connection, not Kate. Maybe. But here's the problem with that argument. Context. Because the rumor that labeled Meghan the Duchess of Yacht had resurfaced online just days before the summit. It had trended briefly, causing embarrassment, frustration, and panic inside Team Sussex. It had been discussed in group chats. It had been mentioned in influencer commentary. It had appeared in several reaction videos that Meghan did not appreciate. The timing wasn't random. Meghan knew the phrase was circulating again. Kate knew it was circulating again. The palace knew it was circulating again. So when Kate referenced luxury decks, she wasn't stumbling into controversy. She was stepping directly into something hot. And she chose to do it anyway. But again, why? Why would Kate, who has built her public persona on being measured, calm, and non-confrontational, suddenly decide to deliver a perfectly aimed jab? To understand that, you need to rewind the story. Because this moment didn't stand alone. It was the result of a cascade of decisions, messages, and behind-the-scenes maneuvers, some of which Meghan initiated. Some of which upset Kate more than the public realized. And one of which came just days before the summit, setting the stage for the exact moment we just broke down. But before we follow the thread backward, let's take a moment to examine the fallout. Because fallout reveals truth. The speech ended. Applause rang out. Cameras flashed. Kate walked off stage to whispered congratulations. But the buzz in the hall wasn't about her message on the workforce. It was about the shade. Journalists crowded whispers into their recorders. Analysts typed frantically. Hashtag theories multiplied like wildfire. Even audience members with no prior interest in royal drama went home wondering if they had just witnessed a diplomatic slip or a calculated strike. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Meghan's reaction escalated quickly. According to those familiar with her immediate response, she wasn't calm, reflective, or dismissive. She was livid, insulted, betrayed. She interpreted the remark as a personal attack, not a playful joke. And because Meghan sees herself as someone who has already endured years of criticism, judgment, and online character assassination, the comment hit deeper than it might have for someone else. It wasn't about the phrase itself. It was about the symbolism. To Meghan, it said, Kate is siding with the people mocking you. And to her, that crossed a line. But Meghan's fury was only part of the fallout. The other half was the reaction within the palace. Because while some aides tried to laugh it off, pretending it was harmless, others knew exactly what was coming. They knew Meghan wouldn't let this slide. They knew it would escalate. They knew it would ignite another chapter in a long, exhausting feud. And what they feared most was simple, public escalation. Because for years, both women had maintained a kind of cold détente. Polite distance, carefully phrased statements. Silent disapproval rather than open conflict. Kate's comment cracked that détente open. Suddenly, a feud that had once been invisible became visible. Playful on the surface, razor-sharp underneath. And the palace, for all its power, hates visibility it didn't plan for. But this chapter isn't just about the joke. It's about understanding why that joke mattered. Why Meghan reacted so strongly. Why the internet exploded. And why Kate, usually so careful, slipped a line that was anything but accidental. Because the truth is this. Kate's joke didn't come out of nowhere. It was triggered, sparked, provoked. And what provoked it was something Meghan did privately, something she never imagined would reach Kate's ears. And once you understand what Meghan did, everything changes. Because the real story isn't just that Kate made a joke. The real story is why. And that's where we're heading next. Straight into the private message Meghan sent just days before the summit. The message Kate absolutely saw. And the message that lit the fuse on everything that followed. What exactly was in the private message Meghan sent just days before the Future Workforce Summit? The message Kate saw, the message that instantly tightened the air around Kensington Palace, the message that transformed a routine keynote speech into a strategic battlefield. Because make no mistake, nothing Kate said on that stage came from nowhere. It was a reaction, a response, a quiet rebuttal to something Meghan initiated. And the strangest part? Meghan believed she was being subtle, controlled, diplomatic. She believed she was playing a game of influence from afar. Carefully crafted messages, carefully chosen contacts, carefully positioned narratives. But what she didn't realize was simple. The message didn't stay private. It didn't stay contained. It didn't stay with the two people she sent it to. It spread. It echoed. It reached places she did not intend it to reach, including Kate's phone. Let's go back to 4 days before the summit. Meghan, fresh off a week of media chatter, swirling speculation, unflattering think pieces, and resurfaced rumors, was feeling the pressure. And when Meghan feels pressure, she gets proactive. She reaches out. She tries to frame the narrative. She tries to enter the conversation, not directly, but through other people. That's what happened here. She sent a message, described by one insider as polished but unmistakably controlling, to two individuals associated with the event's organizational structure. Not Kate's staff, not royal aides, but people close enough to know both camps. People Meghan likely assumed would sympathize with her, respect her, or at least appreciate her perspective. But the tone of the message is what ignited the spark. Because tone is everything. And Meghan's tone, while outwardly polite, carried an unmistakable undercurrent. A reminder of her experience, her global influence, her activism, her media reach, wrapped inside what was framed as a helpful suggestion. But let's be honest, suggestions from Meghan often read like directives. This one was no different. She wrote that she was concerned about the direction of certain global youth initiatives and wanted to ensure the summit didn't alienate certain communities. She mentioned her past work, her experiences, her belief that narratives around privilege, access, and professional pathways needed to be handled with sensitivity. And here's where she crossed the line she didn't see, but Kate certainly did. She implied, subtly but unmistakably, that Kate's messaging in past events had been inadvertently exclusive. The phrase one organizer remembered most was this: "It's important we avoid presenting success as something accessed only through traditional institutions or royal proximity." Royal proximity, a phrase Meghan has used before, a phrase that always lands like a dart thrown across a quiet room. To Meghan, this wasn't an insult. This wasn't even shade. It was context. It was perspective. It was help. But to anyone who knows the history, anyone who knows how carefully Kate has built her role, how tightly she protects the integrity of her projects, how deeply she cares about her initiatives, this was more than critique. It was a provocation. And the message didn't stop there. Meghan also suggested that if the summit ever wanted a broader, more inclusive global presence, she would be willing to contribute or appear in future collaborative spaces. On paper, that looks like an offer. In practice, it reads as strategic positioning, a re-entry attempt, a tether thrown back toward the royal sphere she publicly renounced. And yes, this was exactly the kind of move that drives the palace insane. Because Meghan has mastered the art of showing up where she's not expected, sliding into spaces she once belonged to, appearing in conversations she wasn't invited to, trying to overlap, mirror, or rival initiatives Kate has spent years nurturing. And while Kate has kept her silence, maintained her composure, and avoided confrontation, the tension has been building quietly, invisibly, behind the scenes. But here's where things get truly wild. Meghan ended the message with a line that multiple sources found condescending, even patronizing. "I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way, but given my experience navigating high-pressure institutions, I know how easy it is for messaging to be misinterpreted." Misinterpreted. A word heavy with implication. A word that suggests the speaker, Kate, doesn't understand the consequences of her own messaging. A word that insinuates superiority, expertise, authority. To Meghan, this was nothing more than thoughtful communication. But to Kate's team, to anyone who has watched this rivalry unfold, it was a trigger, because Meghan wasn't just offering critique. She was indirectly positioning herself as more culturally aware, more socially informed, more globally relevant. She was hinting that Kate's work lacked nuance, depth, modernity. And here's the twist that shocked even Meghan's allies. The message was forwarded to Kate within an hour. Not maliciously, not as gossip, but because one of the recipients thought Kate needed to see it. And when Kate read it, she didn't explode. She didn't vent. She didn't rant. She didn't even raise her voice. Those who were with her at the time say she went quiet, very quiet, thoughtful, still, the kind of stillness that tells you a line has been crossed and a boundary has been breached. Kate's relationship with Meghan has always been complicated, respectful from a distance, contained, tolerant, but not warm. And Kate has never appreciated Meghan's tone of self-importance, her tendency to speak as though she knows best, her habit of implying that she, Meghan, sees what Kate does not. So when she read that message, with its layers of suggestion and superiority, the reaction wasn't anger. It was decision. A decision to stop absorbing. A decision to stop overlooking. A decision to stop letting Meghan subtly insert herself into her work. And what made it worse? Meghan didn't stop at critique. She also referenced the resurfaced online narrative she was desperate to bury, the Duchess of Yacht rumor, which had begun trending again. She wrote, "Given how easily narratives are twisted, I'm sure we both understand the importance of avoiding language that plays into outdated stereotypes, especially those used against women in the public eye. On the surface, this is true. On the surface, it even sounds noble. But in context, in timing, in proximity to everything else, it landed wrong. Very wrong. It came across as a veiled warning, a subtle reminder that she was a victim of online malice, and that Kate should avoid participating in anything that might even accidentally align with those narratives. To someone like Kate, this was backward, upside down. Meghan positioning herself as the moral authority, the experience guide, the one who should shape Kate's approach to public messaging, felt like overreach. A power move disguised as concern. And that's the real moment the seed of Kate's luxury decks line was planted. Not out of cruelty, not out of pettiness, but out of exhaustion. Frustration, a sense of being lectured by someone who walked away from the institution but still tries to shape it from afar. Because Meghan believes she knows the royal system better than those inside it. She believes she sees its weaknesses more clearly. She believes she understands public emotion more deeply. And maybe she does in some ways. But what she doesn't understand is how her tone filters through the walls of Kensington Palace. Because while Meghan sees her messages as enlightened, those messages often land like passive-aggressive masterclasses in superiority. And the organizers who received the message, they didn't delete it. They shared it. They whispered about it. They debated how to reply. And one of them, sensing tension, forwarded it directly to Kate with the note. "Thought you should see this before Thursday." And that was it. That was the moment the game changed. Kate's calm expression as she read it. Her long, controlled exhale. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, a sign she was processing, not upset. And her soft, almost imperceptible response. "I see." Two words that meant far more than they suggested. She didn't rant. She didn't cry. She didn't vent to aides. She simply absorbed the message and filed it away, quietly, meticulously. And when she took the stage at the Future Workforce Summit, that quiet file resurfaced. Not loudly, not angrily, but with precision. Strategic precision. The kind that only comes from someone who has been pushed just slightly too far. Someone who has been patient long enough. Someone who knows the power of a single, well-timed line. But what most people don't know is that Meghan didn't stop with that one message. She sent another one. More emotional, more frustrated, more revealing, just hours later. And that second message? That's the one that truly set the palace whispering. What did she say in it? Why was it so damning? And how did it escalate everything even further? That's where we're heading next. What pushed Meghan to try to reinsert herself into royal initiatives? After leaving the institution, after condemning its structure, after building an entirely separate identity in Montecito, just days before Kate's biggest keynote appearance in months. Why did she feel compelled to send not just one, but two private messages that rippled through royal circles like an emotional tremor no one was prepared for? And even more importantly, what exactly was in that second message that made palace aides go from mildly annoyed to deeply concerned? Let's step into Meghan's mindset, because this part of the story doesn't make sense unless you understand the emotional pressure cooker Meghan had been living in that week. Meghan is a woman who operates on momentum. When public perception dips, when headlines sour, when rumors resurface, she doesn't retreat. She doesn't sit quietly. She doubles down. She tries to reclaim the narrative, redirect attention, remind people of her relevance, her influence, her global humanitarian focus, as she so often describes it. But that week, nothing was cooperating. Rumors she thought she'd buried years ago resurfaced. Media critics published biting analyses of her brand. Commentators mocked one of her recent projects. Royal watchers rehashed old interviews. And to top it off, Kate's rising visibility, her return to public duties, had begun overshadowing Meghan's latest attempts at rebranding. Every time Kate appeared in public, Meghan's PR team had to watch social media lean heavily in Kate's favor. The contrast stung, and Meghan hates contrast, because contrast suggests hierarchy, ranking, comparison, and Meghan has never believed she should be anything less than equal to Kate. Equal in influence, equal in platform, equal in narrative spotlight. She says it in private constantly. If they would just treat me equally, none of this would have happened. Equal, equal, equal. But the monarchy doesn't work that way, and Meghan knows it. That knowledge isn't just frustrating. It's infuriating. So when she saw Kate was scheduled for a high-profile summit speech, Meghan panicked. Not outwardly. Meghan is skilled at keeping emotional storms hidden beneath polished vocabulary, but internally, the anxiety surged. Kate speaking on workforce empowerment, mentorship, opportunity? That territory overlaps dangerously with Meghan's chosen branding. Female empowerment, global leadership, youth inspiration. It felt, to Meghan, like Kate stepping into her lane, or worse, reclaiming a lane Meghan once tried to own. And Meghan is not someone who lets lanes overlap without reacting. That's why she sent the first message, an attempt to subtly influence the summit's direction. But the second message? That was pure emotion. Sent late at night. Sent quickly. Sent impulsively. And it was exactly the kind of message you regret sending the next morning, but Meghan didn't regret it. She felt justified, empowered. She felt she had been disrespected and believed speaking up was her right. Let's reconstruct what insiders say the second message contained. While the first message was wrapped in diplomacy, the second one was drenched in raw frustration. She expressed disappointment that certain royal initiatives continue to ignore modern narratives. She criticized tone-deaf messaging around opportunities. She suggested Kate had fallen behind the times in her approach to youth empowerment. And she even implied that some of Kate's past campaigns lacked real-world impact, something that landed like a slap across Kensington Palace. But here's the line that made aides exchange looks of disbelief. Sometimes it feels like old institutions cling to familiar faces instead of embracing real innovation. Familiar faces. A transparent jab. A direct insinuation that Kate's popularity is the product of privilege, not merit. A line Meghan has privately said many times. A line that reflects her belief that she has worked harder, fought harder, and deserves equal recognition. But once again, this message didn't remain private. One of the recipients thought Meghan was in distress. They described the message as emotionally charged, unsteady, and indicating a need to be seen. And whether Meghan intended it or not, the implication that she wanted involvement, influence, or partnership in royal-related initiatives ignited panic. Because it wasn't just the tone, it was the timing. 3 days before Kate's summit speech. 3 days before one of the most important appearances of her year. 3 days before Kate needed calm, focus, stability, control. And instead, Meghan injected tension, accusation, and competitive energy into a situation Kate had been preparing for months. But here's the part almost no one knew until now. Meghan also referenced, indirectly but unmistakably, that resurfaced yacht rumor. And she did it in a way that shocked even her supporters. In the second message, she wrote, "I've had to weather narratives designed to diminish me. Narratives rooted in class bias and misogyny. Narratives that associate women with luxury instead of leadership." It was subtle, but everyone understood the subtext. Meghan was bracing for another hit. She feared Kate, intentionally or not, might benefit from the rumor resurfacing. She believed Kate's team was not doing enough to distance the palace from online narratives mocking her. She wanted reassurance. She wanted acknowledgement. She wanted, essentially, control. And the palace cannot give her that. Here's where everything turns. When this second message reached Kate, not from gossip, but from an organizer genuinely worried, it landed differently than the first. The first felt like a nudge, a critique, a suggestion, but the second felt like pressure. like entitlement, like Meghan trying to supervise royal messaging from thousands of miles away. People close to Kate say the second message is what truly irritated her, not because of the content itself, but because of the pattern. It showed, once again, Meghan's desire to influence conversations she had walked away from. It showed her inability to accept distance. It showed her need to remain tethered to royal relevancy. To Kate, it wasn't threatening. It wasn't alarming. It was exhausting. And exhaustion changes things. Kate does not lash out. She does not scream. She does not send angry messages. But she does have limits. And Meghan's second message crossed one of them. The boundary between independence and interference. And all of this happened quietly, invisibly. No headlines, no leaks, no dramatic confrontation. But inside the palace, aides whispered, "Why does she keep trying to get involved? What does she want from us now? Is she trying to sabotage the summit? Is she trying to reinsert herself because of Kate's return?" The question that echoed most, the one no one dared say aloud in front of senior staff, was simple. Is Meghan trying to compete with Kate again? And that question mattered because competition changes strategy. Competition breeds defensiveness. Competition shapes tone. So when Kate walked on stage at the summit, she wasn't just delivering a speech. She was responding. Quietly, elegantly, strategically. Her luxury decks line didn't come from nowhere. It came from days of watching Meghan attempt to steer, influence, or overshadow a space she no longer belonged to. Kate wasn't cruel. She wasn't malicious. But she was done absorbing, done being lectured, done tolerating subtle power plays disguised as collaboration. That's why her line hit so sharply. It wasn't merely humor. It was a boundary drawn in public. But to fully understand the real story, you need to know what Meghan was doing behind the scenes before she sent those messages. Because Meghan wasn't just reacting to rumors. She wasn't just defending her reputation. She was planning something bigger. An initiative. A partnership. A media appearance. A subtle attempt to align herself, again, with one of Kate's signature issues. And that attempt explains everything. Why Meghan reached out, why she panicked, why she spiraled, why she inserted herself right before the summit. Because Meghan wasn't just worried about being overshadowed. She was preparing to re-enter the same global philanthropic space Kate was dominating. And that is the true catalyst. So what was Meghan planning? What project was she trying to revive or reinvent? And why did it put her on a collision course with Kate at the worst possible moment? That is exactly where the story goes next. Here's the part of the story Meghan desperately wishes did not matter. The part she wants erased, forgotten, buried under new projects, new interviews, new ambitions. But no matter how hard she tries, no matter how carefully she crafts her image, no matter how strategically her team shapes her narrative, this piece always finds its way back into the spotlight like a ghost that refuses to stay dead. The Duchess of Yacht rumor. A rumor so old, so twisted, so widely circulated at its peak that it became its own viral creature. An internet-born shadow that clung to Meghan long before the palace ever welcomed her and long after she left it. A rumor that resurfaces whenever tension spikes, whenever Meghan's critics smell blood, whenever something in the royal ecosystem shifts out of balance. And in the week leading up to Kate's summit speech, the rumor didn't just resurface. It exploded. It all started with a single paparazzi video, a grainy clip of a photographer yelling a question at Meghan as she stepped into her SUV after a private meeting in Los Angeles. You couldn't even see her face clearly. You could barely hear the question. But the photographer, emboldened by chaos, shouted the one thing guaranteed to go viral. "So Meghan, which yacht are you sailing next?" Meghan froze for half a second too long. Because in celebrity media, hesitation is everything. Silence is a headline. Pause is confirmation. And even though Meghan didn't respond, didn't defend herself, didn't scold the photographer, her non-answer fueled a fire that had already been smoldering online. Within hours, tabloids ran mocking headlines. Commentators reposted old screenshots. Royal-focused YouTubers resurrected long-forgotten stories. Anonymous accounts gleefully repeated claims Meghan has denied for years. And TikTok fanned the flames with stitched videos, reaction clips, and speculative breakdowns that had nothing to do with truth and everything to do with spectacle. For Meghan, it was humiliating, infuriating, painful. But for Kate, it was background noise. until Meghan's messages dragged it into Kate's orbit. Remember that line in Meghan's second message? Narratives that associate women with luxury instead of leadership. That was a direct reference to the resurfaced rumor. A reminder to organizers to avoid amplifying anything that unintentionally played into online chatter about Meghan's past. But to Kate, reading it days later, it felt like something else entirely. It felt like Meghan saying, "Watch what you say. Don't accidentally trigger anything about me." And Kate, who had spent years having every syllable of her speeches scrutinized by tabloids, social media, and critics, felt the sting of that line. Because if anyone knows what it's like to be mocked, ridiculed, or thrust into unfair narratives, it's her. Kate has been on magazine covers with headlines dissecting her weight, her smile, her posture, her motherhood, her outfits, her silence. She has weathered every kind of unfair commentary imaginable, and she never once told anyone how to speak to avoid upsetting her. So when Meghan placed that burden, however politely, onto Kate's upcoming summit speech, it struck a nerve Kate rarely lets anyone see. But here's the real twist. The rumor didn't just resurface. It resurfaced at the worst possible moment. Because Meghan was preparing a new initiative, a new brand stance, a new public-facing pillar of purpose, and it overlapped directly with Kate's territory. Meghan had spent months quietly developing a global mentorship project, something designed to spotlight women's career paths, opportunities, challenges, and entrepreneurship across the world. Something with a glossy media campaign attached. Something she hoped would position her as a global voice for mentorship in the digital age. And what was Kate's summit speech about? Workforce empowerment, youth pathways, overcoming obstacles, resilience in career building, mentorship. The overlap was undeniable. To Meghan, it felt like competition. To the palace, it felt like imitation. To Kate, it felt like provocation. So when the yacht rumor resurfaced, Meghan panicked not just because she felt personally attacked, but because it threatened to undermine the very initiative she was preparing to launch. The rumor made her look unserious, out of touch, hypocritical, and if Kate's speech landed perfectly, Meghan feared the comparison would be brutal. That's why Meghan's messages were so emotional. That's why she felt the need to guide Kate's tone. That's why she slipped warnings into her suggestions. She was trying to protect an initiative Kate didn't even know she was launching. Now let's talk about how the rumor resurfaced inside royal circles. Because yes, even the palace heard about it. Staff monitors online narratives constantly, not to participate, but to assess risk, to anticipate headlines, to prepare for potential fallout. So when the yacht rumor began trending again, it landed in briefing folders, notes, digital reports. And although the palace rarely acts on online chatter, Meghan referencing the rumor in her messages made it relevant. It placed the rumor and Meghan's emotional sensitivity around it directly in Kate's path. And that changed the entire dynamic. Kate read Meghan's concern. Kate understood the subtext. Kate saw the panic beneath the polished sentences. And something clicked. Not cruelty. Not malice. Not vindictiveness. But clarity. Clarity that Meghan was once again trying to tether herself to royal narratives. Clarity that Meghan was preparing to step into her lane. Clarity that Meghan was already framing herself as the more modern, more aware, more culturally sensitive figure. And that clarity is what led to the moment on stage. The moment Kate leaned into humor, dipped her words in irony, and delivered the line that detonated like a silent bomb. Luxury decks. 2 words. 1 explosion. Because in that moment, Kate wasn't just referencing the yacht rumor, intentionally or not. She was referencing the absurdity of it. The ridiculousness. The way Meghan lets the internet get under her skin. The way Meghan's panic drives her into reactionary decisions. It wasn't cruelty. It was commentary. Commentary on how Meghan handles pressure, not on the rumor itself. And the room felt it. And Meghan felt it even more. Because the rumor was already eating at her. And now Kate had unintentionally stepped into its shadow. But here's where things get even more complicated. At the exact moment the rumor resurfaced online, Meghan was planning to pitch her new initiative to a high-profile corporate partner. A meeting was set. A concept deck was prepared. Media angles were being drafted. Everything was lining up until the rumor derailed the narrative. Meghan was terrified the partner would see the trending term and question her professionalism, her legitimacy, her leadership positioning. So she scrambled. She reached out. She tried to steady the ground beneath her. But what she didn't realize was this. Her attempt to reinsert herself into the royal philanthropic space, combined with the resurfaced rumor, created a perfect storm that triggered Kate's shift in tone. Because for Kate, the rumor wasn't painful. It wasn't personal. It wasn't emotional. But Meghan's reaction was. And that emotional reaction, spilling into messages, warnings, suggestions, pleas, was what pushed Kate to deliver a line that said, "Enough. You don't get to guide my speeches. You don't get to shape my messaging. You don't get to control how I present myself. You don't get to influence my work when you've left the institution entirely. You don't get to mix your nerves with my responsibilities." Kate didn't say those words out loud. She didn't write them in a message. She didn't call Meghan. She put them into a sentence. A soft sentence. A diplomatic sentence. A playful sentence. But a sentence with a spine. And Meghan heard it loud and clear. But here's the twist that will reshape everything you think you know about this rivalry. The rumor didn't resurface naturally. It was triggered. Someone resurfaced it deliberately. Someone close to Meghan. Someone who knew her emotional patterns. Someone who understood how she reacts under pressure. Someone who unintentionally made everything worse. And that someone is exactly who we're going to talk about next. Because once you see who reignited the rumor and why, the entire saga becomes even more unhinged than it already appears. Here's the truth: Meghan never wanted reaching the outside world. The person who reignited the yacht rumor, the person who triggered the spiral, the person whose actions sent Meghan into an emotional tailspin wasn't a stranger, a troll, a critic, or a tabloid reporter. It was someone she trusted. Someone in her circle. Someone who thought they were protecting her, but ended up pouring gasoline on the very fire they were trying to extinguish. This part of the story is messy, uncomfortable, and painfully human, because behind the polished Instagram filters and carefully crafted PR veneers, Meghan is surrounded by people who sometimes act out of panic, fear, or desperation. And in this case, that panic created a disaster. It happened the night before Meghan sent her second message. The emotional one, the one that landed like a spark in a room full of dry leaves. A close friend of hers, someone she often confides in, someone who has historically overreacted whenever Meghan is in the news, called her in a frenzy. This friend had stumbled onto a viral TikTok chain where the yacht rumor was being discussed again. And instead of calming Meghan, or informing her gently, or allowing her PR team to handle things professionally, this friend unleashed a barrage of frantic warnings. You need to see this. They're using your name again. They're spreading those old stories. You can't let this happen right before Kate's big speech. You need to get ahead of it. Every sentence pushing Meghan into deeper distress. Every word nudging her closer to the emotional cliff. And instead of ignoring it, instead of brushing it off, instead of reminding herself that internet rumors have no power over her real life, Meghan clicked the links. She watched the TikToks. She read the comments. She scrolled, and scrolled, and scrolled, and every scroll chipped away at the calm she had been trying so hard to maintain. Because Meghan is someone who absorbs negativity like a sponge. She takes it personally. She internalizes it. She tries to analyze it, fix it, correct it, control it. And in doing so, she ends up feeding the spiral instead of stopping it. That night, Harry was already asleep. The house was quiet. The warmth of the Montecito mansion felt hollow. Meghan sat in the dimly lit kitchen, glowing only from the marble reflection of her phone screen. And that's when the spiral fully ignited. Because the friend who had panicked didn't stop there. They forwarded screenshots. They forwarded commentary. They forwarded memes. And worst of all, they forwarded a clip of Kate's summit rehearsal leaked by someone in the event circuit. A clip that wasn't controversial at all, but Meghan viewed through a paranoid lens. In that rehearsal clip, Kate said nothing problematic, nothing shady, nothing referencing Meghan. But Meghan wasn't in a logical state anymore. She saw competitiveness where there was none. She saw undertones where none existed. She saw Kate smiling through her lines and interpreted it as pointed confidence. The confidence of someone who knew she was about to overshadow Meghan's upcoming initiative. That's when Meghan snapped into action mode. She texted her PR advisor. She called another. She sent 3 voice notes to 2 different friends. She drafted and deleted a public message 5 times. The voice notes, according to someone who heard them, were filled with a mix of anger and heartbreak. Emotional contradictions pouring out in breathless frustration. "She knows what she's doing," Meghan said in one. "Why would she reference leadership like that? She's trying to push me aside. She's not the only one who cares about women. This is going to overshadow everything I've been building." But the real emotional punch came from something deeper, something Meghan rarely admits aloud. "She still has the power to ruin my image." That line hung in the air like a confession, a truth Meghan didn't want to say but couldn't suppress. This is the part people misunderstand. Meghan doesn't just dislike comparison. She fears it, because comparison, in the royal world, is inevitable. And Kate always comes out untouched, unbothered, untangled. Meanwhile, Meghan, with her Hollywood past and her complex public narrative, is always fighting uphill. So when Meghan saw that the yacht rumor had resurfaced right before Kate's big summit moment, she felt cornered, like the universe was aligning again to position Kate as the polished duchess while reducing her, Meghan, to sensationalized gossip. Which brings us to her reaction the moment Kate made that luxury decks remark. Because when Meghan first saw the clip, she didn't simply feel insulted. She felt exposed, mocked, targeted, re-traumatized by an old narrative she despises. Witnesses, including one nanny, one assistant, and a friend on speakerphone, described Meghan's reaction as instantaneous and volcanic. She slammed her phone on the counter. She muttered, "I knew she would do something like this." She began pacing, fast and restless, in tight circles. Her voice wavered between outrage and disbelief. "She's mocking me. She knows what that rumor does to me. She did this intentionally. She planned this." None of which was necessarily true, but Meghan's emotional state didn't care about truth. It cared about perception, and perception had become her reality. Within minutes, Meghan was typing aggressively, not to the public, not to her PR team, but to the same event organizers she had messaged days earlier. And that message was not polished, not strategic, not measured. It was an emotional outburst thinly disguised as concern. And that outburst is what caused alarm inside royal circles. The organizers didn't know what to do with it. They didn't understand why Meghan was inserting herself again. They didn't want to be in the middle of a royal feud. They forwarded the message to a palace aide, who forwarded it to another, who sent it directly, reluctantly, to Kensington Palace. And when Kate saw it, the shift happened. Not explosive, not angry, not bitter. Cold, quiet, decisive. Kate has always hated drama. She has always avoided confrontation. She has always maintained distance. But that message, that emotional spillover, was too much. It felt invasive, untimely, and deeply unfair. It arrived the morning of her summit preparation meeting. It landed like a disruption, a warning, a complication she didn't need. And that's why the luxury decks line slipped from her mouth so effortlessly. She didn't plan it. She didn't strategize it. She didn't rehearse it. It came from emotional truth, a truth Kate rarely expresses publicly. That Meghan's constant attempts to reinsert herself were exhausting, confusing, distracting, and intrusive. Kate's line wasn't an attack. It was a boundary, a subtle but firm one. But Meghan didn't see it that way. Meghan saw it as betrayal, a slap, a humiliation, a public mocking of her past and her pain. And that's what triggered the moment no one saw coming. The moment Meghan nearly went public with a clapback so dramatic that her advisors had to intervene. Because after pacing, crying, venting, voice noting, and spiraling, Meghan made a decision. She was going to respond. Publicly, directly, immediately. She began drafting it. A statement, a caption, a vague empowerment post that was clearly referencing Kate's remark. Something designed to portray Meghan as targeted, misunderstood, and morally superior. But someone stepped in. Someone who understood the consequences. Someone who had seen this play out before. Someone who knew Meghan was about to make a catastrophic mistake. And their intervention is the only reason Meghan didn't press post. Who stopped her? What did they say? And why did Meghan interpret it as betrayal? That's where we're headed next. Who stopped Meghan Markle from posting the mid-meltdown public clapback that would have guaranteed a global media firestorm? Who stepped into the emotional chaos swirling through the Montecito mansion and said the one word Meghan did not want to hear, don't. And more importantly, why did Meghan view that warning not as help, not as loyalty, not as guidance, but as betrayal? To understand this moment, this precise pivot point in the drama, you have to visualize the scene inside Meghan's home just hours after Kate's future workforce summit remark went viral. It was early afternoon in California, the kind of sun-drenched day Montecito is famous for. But inside the house, the atmosphere wasn't bright. It was tense, heavy, almost electric with pent-up emotion. Staff members were keeping their heads down. Doors were half closed to dampen noise. The air smelled of stress. The kind of stress that comes not from one problem, but from a dozen issues swelling into a single pressure point. And Meghan? Meghan was pacing again. That pacing had become her involuntary reflex, the physical embodiment of spiraling thoughts she couldn't slow down. Every few steps, she'd turn sharply. Every turn came with a muttered comment, a frustrated exhale, a reflexive swipe across her phone screen. She had drafts saved, screenshots collected, quotes lined up. She was constructing the perfect clapback, something sharp enough to sting but smooth enough to seem accidentally meaningful. Her instinct wasn't just to defend herself. It was to reclaim the narrative, to show she wasn't the one being mocked. She was the one rising above it. But rising above it by posting something that absolutely did not rise above anything. And then came the moment, the exact moment. Someone intervened. That someone was her senior PR advisor. Not the soft-spoken assistant. Not the friend who panics. Not Harry, who tends to avoid these situations because he knows Meghan doesn't want emotional restraint when she feels wounded. No, it was the advisor. The one who has pulled Meghan back from the brink before. The one who has seen the consequences of reactive posting. The one who has watched their carefully built strategies fall apart in seconds when Meghan lets emotion override caution. This advisor arrived at the house with a calm demeanor, not falsely calm, but professionally calm. The kind of calm that says, I know how bad this looks, but we can still control the fallout. They found Meghan standing at the kitchen counter, gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles were white. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from the exhausting cycle of outrage and disbelief. The advisor didn't sit. They stood across from her, measured the moment, and said softly, Please don't post that. Meghan froze, not physically, but emotionally, as if someone had turned down the volume of her internal monologue for the first time all day. She blinked, slowly, then her expression hardened. What? She asked the question with disbelief, maybe even insult, because in her mind, she was the one being attacked. She was the one being targeted. She was the one trying to defend her dignity. And this advisor, someone who should have been on her side, was telling her to stop? But the advisor didn't back down. Meghan, they said firmly, you're making decisions from a place of pain, not strategy. This is not the right move. And that simple truth pierced Meghan deeper than Kate's remark ever could. Because Meghan hates, absolutely hates, when people suggest she's emotional instead of strategic. She prides herself on her intelligence, her insight, her ability to analyze. Being told she was acting from emotion felt like an accusation. A dismissal, a downplaying of her experience. This isn't emotional, she snapped. This is necessary. But the advisor didn't flinch. No, it's emotional, they said. And if you post what you wrote, you will look reactive. And Kate will look calm. And that is the worst possible dynamic for public perception right now. Meghan's face tightened. Her jaw clenched. The silence between them thickened. Whose side are you on? She finally asked. The advisor had heard this question before, but never with so much edge. They took a breath. Yours, they answered. Which is why I'm telling you the truth. Then they laid out the reality Meghan didn't want to hear. The reality she always resists, the one that sparks her deepest insecurities. No matter how unfair it is, no matter how much work you've done, no matter how hard you've fought, the public will always compare you to her. And she will always come out looking composed if you react out of anger. That was the sentence that cracked something inside Meghan. Not because it wasn't true, but because it was. And Meghan can accept many things, struggle, criticism, temporary setbacks. But she cannot accept helplessness. She cannot accept being overshadowed. She cannot accept a narrative she cannot fully control. So she pushed back. I'm not going to let her embarrass me in public, Meghan said. She didn't embarrass you, the advisor replied gently. She made a joke. You're about to amplify its meaning by reacting. That pushed Meghan over the edge. Amplify its meaning, she repeated sharply. She referenced a rumor that has been used to humiliate me for years. She knows exactly what she said. But the advisor shook their head. She didn't reference the rumor, Meghan. You're connecting the dots because of what's been resurfacing online. And you're letting trolls dictate your choices. That line, "You're letting trolls dictate your choices," is where Meghan shifted from defensive to offended. Because in her mind, she wasn't listening to trolls. She was responding to an attack. A real one. From someone she believed had been passive-aggressive toward her for years. "You don't understand," Meghan said.